Well, being that Pastor Nominating Committee is doing this, we are trying to do this a little different today. So instead of you hearing the scripture first, I'm going to talk a little bit, and then Fred's going to read a scripture, and then we'll talk a little bit, and Fred's going to read another scripture. So just so you aren't totally confused as to what's going on, because it doesn't follow the book the way Darlene wrote it. And I think you all know who I am, but if you don't, my name is Patty Nordhoff, and I'm part of the Pastor Nominating Committee. One of the things I've learned in my years as a Presbyterian is that we never do anything quickly. There are many denominational jokes about this, like the one which someone runs into a Presbyterian church yelling that the building is on fire. And the congregation's response is to make a motion to appoint a chairperson who could recruit a committee to look into the matter. But even Presbyterians have their limits. We know it's hard to be patient, especially when you're not sure what's going on and when you're not sure what's coming next. So on behalf of the Pastor Nominating Committee, here are the ideas we need to emphasize at this stage of this long process. We need to listen for the voice of God and figure out how to recognize it. One good illustration of this challenge comes from the story of the calling of Samuel.
From Samuel, verse 3, the lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the temple of the Lord where the ark of God was. Then the Lord called Samuel, and he said, "Here I am," and ran to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me." But he said, "I did not call. Lie down again." So he went and lay down, and the Lord called again, "Samuel." And Samuel arose and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me." But he said, "I did not call, my son. Lie down again." Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord, and the word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. And the Lord called Samuel again the third time, and he arose and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me." Then Eli perceived that the Lord was calling the boy. Therefore Eli said to Samuel, "Go lie down, and if he calls you, you shall say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant hears.'" So Samuel went and lay down in his place. And the Lord came and stood, calling, as at other times, "Samuel, Samuel." And Samuel said, "Speak, for your servant hears." Then the Lord spoke to Samuel.
Just like Samuel, we know it's hard for all of us to figure out where God is calling us to go, what God is calling us to do, and whether the voice we hear is the voice of God at all. I've heard it many times over the years that God has a plan for Fairgreen. I think we all get that, but figuring out exactly what it is a whole other issue. I remember in a share group many years ago, a friend of mine who was uncertain about her job situation said, "I know that God is in this, but could he just write the answers on the wall in purple crayon so I get it?" The PNC is trying to figure out what the current plan is with respect to our leadership, and unfortunately, no one with a purple crayon has written it on the wall. We know there is a plan, however, and we have to trust that God will bring it into being in his time. As we wait for that plan to unfold, we have to work hard to remain hopeful, even when we might not feel it. How do you hear God's leading? Does God nudge you towards a particular thought or activity? The writer of Hebrews speaks to this when saying in chapter 10, verse 23,
From Hebrews, let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful.
the author of Hebrews goes on to say,
And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near.
the day that is drawing near in that passage is, of course, Christ's return. For Fairgreen, the short team day we are waiting for is the arrival of a new pastor. Lots of people consider me as a pretty patient person, but even I have my bad days. I mostly seem patient to some because I don't react outwardly to some things. Patience is something we all have to learn, and it's not easy. It would be great if we had a pastor installed by next Sunday, but that's not how the process works. Our patience was tested very hard recently when we discussed bringing in someone to serve as a temporary pastor for at least a year. An opportunity presented itself. A person approached the presbytery to ask about being Fairgreen's temporary pastor, and someone hired as a temporary pastor under the PCUSA rules can become a permanent called and installed pastor if both the church and the pastor agree. But things changed in that person's life, and it didn't work out. That person needed a full-time job in the end. For a few days, we really thought we knew what God's plan was going to be. This was our answer, and then it wasn't. Well, we took a week to lick our wounds and regroup, and a lot of us had vacation time scheduled. Some of us were angry, some of us were really disappointed, or some combination of the both. But we had to keep going. It felt like we had to start over, even though we didn't. We were still working through the process and would have continued to do so while this person served as our pastor. After a week, we started up again. We met 4 times since this has happened. We've made progress. So what do we do in the meantime, and what can you, the congregation, do? We need prayers. We need you to be patient during this process, and believe me, we understand how hard that patience can be. It's a long process. We'll explain the process later in the comments. But we need your participation. We have questions, and we need your input. That's why we wanted to hold a congregational conversation after this worship service. So after church, grab your coffee and donut and meet us in the commons ready to talk. As we are trying to figure out what message we wanted to bring to you today, we boil it down to one sentence. We need to listen to God. We need to be patient and listen to each other.
Amen.
Ephesians 4, verses 1 through 6, says it better than we ever could. I therefore, a prisoner of the Lord, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of calling to which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to the one hope that belongs to your call. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. This is our challenge to you and to us for the next few months. Amen.
Amen.